Welcome back to Practicing the Pause and your guide to enjoying amazing holiday foods guilt-free. So we just talked about perspective and now we're moving on to abundance. A is obviously for abundance, and so we're going to talk about abundance today, and I think it could be one of the most important parts of the pause process because, as I said in your perspective video, our beliefs around food matter way more than we might realize with how we then go and eat our food. And so if we see food as off limits and we are feeling deprivation, then we're often going to react to those thoughts and feelings of deprivation. And so with a different viewpoint of food, seeing it as abundant versus off limits, how we react can also change. Let's start out by looking at this awesome quote by Neal. We don't create abundance. Abundance is always present. We create limitations. Let's consider this quote for a second. While this rings true in every area of our lives, we are simply talking about food right now, right? But consider that food is abundant and you've only ever created limitations around it. Just like a little bit of light in my eyes, you can't tell. So I'm just gonna move over here. There is nothing to feel guilty about when it comes to food. Food is neither good nor bad. We as humans have put labels on food. And the thing is that you are 100% in control of the labels you live by, the rules and regulations you set around food, and your beliefs and actions around food. And I know that sometimes it doesn't feel that way because I've been there, right? Sometimes you completely mentally check out and the next thing you know, you've eaten an entire bag of chips and like you don't even remember it happening. So that can be a little different. And a lot of times all we need to do there is kind of slow down a little bit and try to be more mindful. It's a habit, so it can feel really hard, but that is the solution, is slowing down. But consider that if you're labeling foods bad or create rules that the food is off limits, that often you'll experience feelings of guilt or shame or even worry of what others will think of you when you eat it in front of them. And that these limitations don't actually exist. I mean, they're real, right? You're experiencing them, so they technically exist, but they also don't exist because they're only a manifestation within our mind, right? Abundance, food is always abundant. Food's always there. It's not going anywhere really. And we create the limitations around it. So what's going on is that at some point you stop trusting your body. And I did it too at one point in my life, so I totally get that. No one's ever stopping you from doing anything with food except for yourself. So you know that statement of like, I wish I could eat what I want when I want, something I used to say all the time. I could. I often did. I just was feeling guilty for it. And so I didn't feel like I could. But I was already doing that every time I wanted to. I ate what I wanted when I wanted to, and I just felt really guilty for doing it and often overate it. And so what happens is we lose trust with our body. And, you know, something happens, like we started gaining weight and we just assume like my body doesn't know what it's doing, my metabolism's off. And so the brain just takes over and it's like, okay, I got this, don't worry. And the brain just jumps in and tries to solve problems that weren't problems to begin with. Because the truth is that you were born an intuitive eater. You have an innate natural signal in your body that tells you when you're hungry and when you're full. When you were a baby, you cried, somebody gave you a bottle, and when you were full, you pushed that bottle away. You didn't overeat, you didn't stuff yourself, you pushed it away when you were full. And then somewhere along the lines, something happened and we stopped trusting that process and we let the brain take over. And now the brain's telling us things like that food's not allowed in your life, you have to count calories, you can only have this many calories. And so we start living by these rules we've created with the brain instead of listening to the innate wisdom our body has that just tells us when we're hungry and when we're full. And I know that there's a fear here of overeating, right? When we don't trust our bodies, like I didn't trust my body for a long time, and when we don't trust our bodies, we don't see that as a possibility, that we could just eat food that we want and then just stop eating when we're full. It's like, no, that doesn't happen, right? Like I always overeat. But that's also not true. You don't always overeat, right? You overeat foods that you've created limitations around, and you're often rebelling to those limitations. And when it comes to holidays or any event where we're kind of freaking out and we're not sure how we'll handle all the food that's going to be there, right? We're trying to make a plan. Consider that you don't really need a plan. As long as your plan is that you're going to eat when you're hungry and stop when you're full and enjoy all the food you want, in that way, you're going to do just fine. Nothing's off limits. You can go have pie. You can go have turkey. You can go and have cheese and crackers and wine. And when nothing's off limits, you might find that you eat it differently and that you enjoy it more and you have no guilt. And I know that it's scary, right? I know that it can be really scary to think about, like, just not having control, giving up that control of calorie counting or something, right? But it also can't hurt to try and see how it feels and experiment with it. So just to recap, when we don't see foods off limits, then we are more likely to act or react differently when that food is in our life. And so right now, your goal is just to kind of slow down. Remember that food is completely abundant. The limitations are within our mind. And to try to just kind of wait for hunger to come up and eat for that, and then stop when you're full. And it can be hard, especially if you overeat a lot, right? I used to overeat a lot, used to binge a lot. I didn't know what hunger and fullness felt like. I used to graze all day long, so I never know what hunger felt like. And so there's reasons. If you can't tell what hunger and fullness feel like, there's a reason for that. And it's probably that we're not letting ourselves get hungry, or that we consistently overeat and we don't ever stop at fullness. So slow down and just try to notice what those things feel like to you. All right. In the next lesson, we're going to be talking about how to handle the opinions of others. But before we go there, if you want to, you can answer this question, which is, what gets in the way of believing that food is abundant and doesn't have to be labeled bad or off limits? So I just told you that food is abundant, but I'm sure there was a little something in your brain that chirped up and said, yeah, right, like, that doesn't work for me, not for me. Like, I'm somebody who has to abstain, right? And so just notice what came up when I told you that no food was ever going to be off limits. What thoughts came up? What things told you that that's not true? All right. I will see you in the next video about handling others' opinions.